It's part two of today's show, Trevor, of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel. Is we're going to talk about the Big Ten and how we've done it the last couple days. Is we're going to start off with kind of talking Notre Dame and the Big Ten. And in the first two shows, we did ACC and SEC for a reason. And that is obviously ACC first. Notre Dame has a big slate of games against the ACC this year, volume-wise. Not necessarily like the big games this year are not ACC opponents. Then you look at the SEC, and it's, okay, you've got two pretty big games against SEC teams this year. Arguably the best team you're going to play is the SEC. And that's the conference you're still trying to prove yourself against. Then we come to the Big Ten. And whenever you talk about the Big Ten, the conversation is not the same. It's, okay, should Notre Dame be in the Big Ten? Should they join the Big Ten? What Big Ten team should they be playing? When you look at Notre Dame's schedule this year, they have two Big Ten opponents, but honestly, Purdue's not very good, and nobody really views USC as a Big Ten team. They just happen to be in that league. It's one of the West Coast versions of it. You don't have a schedule littered with the traditional Big Ten teams like you used to have. When I was growing up, Trevor, in September, almost every year, Notre Dame's playing Purdue, Michigan, and Michigan State almost every year. And then there's years where Northwestern is mixed in and Indiana was mixed in the 90s one time. You know, you'd get some of those other games mixed in. You played Ohio State in the mid-90s, and so you'd have Northwestern on there. So, I mean, 1993, Notre Dame kicks the season off against Northwestern. And that year, I believe Notre Dame played 3 Big Ten teams that year. Obviously, you played Michigan, you played Michigan State, you played Purdue, Northwestern. Actually, the first 4 games of the year were all Big Ten teams. Northwestern, at Michigan, home against Michigan State, at Purdue, all wins. And so that used to be a big part of the schedule. And whenever people talk about, when Notre Dame's going to join a league, it's going to be the Big Ten. So there's always that natural connection between Notre Dame and the Big Ten. So what we're going to do in part 1 of today's show is we're going to talk about Notre Dame versus the Big Ten, but not in the same way to where the schedule proves anything against the Big Ten this year. Because if you beat USC this year, for example, no one's going to be like, man, Notre Dame against the Big Ten is really – no, they're still sort of they're in the Big Ten, but they're not really a Big Ten team. Beating Purdue by 100 doesn't do anything for anybody. If anything, if you don't beat them by 50 points, it's like, wow, you guys didn't even beat Purdue by as much as these 4 other Big Ten teams did. It's more so this conversation is about what should Notre Dame's relationship be like with the Big Ten, and that's where we'll kick things off today, Trev.
Yeah, to your point about perception, when you start talking about the Big Ten, look, man, there's one opponent in the Big Ten that it will change the perception of Notre Dame if they beat, and that's Ohio State. But it's not a conference-wide thing.
Right.
And that's
and
the
you don't
one
know that you're going to play them this year. So
exactly.
It's like, yeah.
Exactly. And so we start getting into the discussion of what should Notre Dame's outlook against the Big Ten be like for years down the road. Obviously where the USC rivalry hangs in the balance, it's a little bit questionable. But outside of that, let's talk about the core Big Ten teams. Because, Brian, to your point, when I hear Big Ten, I don't think USC. When I hear Big Ten, I don't think Washington. I don't think UCLA. I don't think Oregon. I think of Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin. Different age groups here, but I also tend to think of Nebraska too, just because I don't remember them being elite in the Big 12.
Definitely different age group.
Yeah, but
it still feels weird to me to say that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Penn State. I forgot about them too, on accident.
Yeah,
but I also think
another team that I don't view as a traditional Big Ten team, because when I was growing up watching Notre Dame play the Penn State, they were an independent. Yeah.
Yep. So what we did before the show is, Brian and I were talking, and we went through and we broke down what Notre Dame's schedule looked like against the Big Ten, basically from now until 2034, really, because that's the next time they have a home-and-home scheduled with Michigan. I know that's a hot topic of this conversation as well. But, Brian, when you look at it, it kind of posed the question, should Notre Dame kind of ramp up how many Big Ten teams they play? Yeah. And I think that's a valid question.
I do. I mean, look, Notre Dame is in this period where the next couple of years are, for the most part, scheduled. And there are some Big Ten teams on the schedule. over the next couple of years. I mean, obviously this year they play Purdue. They play USC this year. Whether or not they play USC next year is still kind of a little up in the air. I've heard USC say, hey, well, we've offered to play them again in 2026 if they're willing to do whatever. And we don't know that that's going to necessarily still be the case. But you look at next season, they start the season off against Wisconsin in Lambeau Field. They play Michigan State at home next season. They play Purdue and Michigan State in 2027, Purdue in 2028. Nobody in 2029 for now. There's a lot of games left to schedule for that season. 2030 and 31, they play Indiana for now. We'll see if the Hoosiers back out of that game. And then in 33 and 34, they play Michigan. So there is a Big Ten presence on the schedule the next couple of years. I mean, they play 4 different Big Ten teams the next 2 seasons: USC, Purdue, Wisconsin, and Michigan State. So the question is, okay, you've got the 4 to 5 every year for the ACC. You've got Navy on your schedule every year. You'd like to continue playing USC every year. So let's just for now say that Notre Dame and USC agree to a 10-year extension of their deal. So they're going to play through 2035. So let's get that out of the way. Then it's like, okay, what should the rest of their schedule look like, and what should the Big Ten influence be on it, and why? And I think there's 2 aspects to why I think the Big Ten should be on it. And the first is going to be, in an era where tradition is becoming more and more dismissed and thrown to the side, Notre Dame needs to be a leader, in my opinion, in reestablishing some of that. I really do believe that. I think that if you want tradition to matter again, then you have to, as schools who talk about the importance of tradition, have to then do things to keep that. And while USC being on the schedule every year should be important to Notre Dame, I don't necessarily think that Notre Dame should continue to bend over backwards to play the game whenever USC feels like it. But I do think that if you're going to say, okay, well, tradition matters, then put your money where your mouth is a little bit from a scheduling standpoint. And I do think making the Big Ten a more prominent part of the schedule matters. I don't want Notre Dame to join the Big Ten. I don't ever want Notre Dame to join the Big Ten, like as a full-time member. But I do believe in tradition. I do believe in respecting rivalries. And I do believe that Notre Dame as a school that now wields a lot of power from a TV standpoint, from a playoff standpoint, from a conference standpoint. They have for a decade. You go back to the role that Jack Swarbrick had in sort of keeping the Pac-12 from eating the Big 12 alive back in 2010 and 11. And I think that there's something along those lines where I say I want to see the Big Ten more on the schedule, not because I want some pathway to joining the league, but I want Notre Dame to kind of get back a little bit to being Notre Dame from a scheduling standpoint. And the question then is, well, what does that look like? And I think that's where you can have some debate. But I believe you should have at least 2 traditional Big Ten teams on your schedule every year. And when I say traditional, I'm okay with saying Penn State is part of that because they have been in the Big Ten since the early 90s. That's at least long enough. That's kind of like saying Arkansas in the SEC. You've been in there almost 30 years. I get it. I don't view Nebraska as being that team just because they didn't join until the 2000s, and I still view them as a Big 8 team. But I do think you should have 2 traditional Big Ten teams on your schedule. The question is who? And is it a consistent 2 teams, or is it a bit of a rotation? And I think that's the first question that I'll pose to you, Trevor. If Notre Dame was going to say, okay, we're going to play 2 Big Ten teams every year, what do you think that should look like? 2 set teams, a rotation of 2 teams, 1 block set for traditional rivals and 1 block set for others? How do you think that should look?
I think it should be a rotation of teams, but give yourself room, like a margin for error, I guess. Because look, when you're scheduling games out to 29 and 2030 and 2031, you're not going to know how good these teams are going to be from year to year. So give yourself a little bit of variance. I think it should be a rolling team or teams every given year. One of the reasons is something that you pointed to earlier this offseason that's kind of stuck with me, and I think about it when I think about the Big Ten. Goal for Notre Dame is to obviously go back and win a national championship. I'm sure that we can all agree that that's the ultimate goal every single year. Well, earlier this offseason, you said that it's hard to win a national championship when you're not the best team in your region. It's difficult. And as much as I like the 12-year deal with Clemson, and as much as I like them getting down and playing, Arkansas this year, and they played Texas A&M last year, and they're getting into the SEC, it's a little difficult when the last two national championship winners were right in your backyard. About a baseball throw away into the border into Michigan, and then about an hour and a half drive east into Ohio. And so I would love the idea for them to have a rotating schedule with the Big Ten. Rotating meaning you play at least two traditional Big Ten teams every year, but maybe the home and homes rotate every 2 to 4 years. So you're not locked into, let's just say for argument's sake, they go with Michigan State, a traditional rival. They play for the megaphone, but then for the next 12 years, you're not locked into playing Michigan State every single year. I think that gives you a little bit of variety and a little bit room for, that's what I mean by variance. If somebody wants to bang their fist on the table for Purdue, I'm cool with that. That's more of the age thing, because my entire life, Notre Dame has lost to Purdue once. I didn't watch the Drew Brees Purdue. I wasn't old enough to remember what that looked like.
But even that team though, Trev, like they beat Notre Dame like a couple times back then. It wasn't something like they were just whooping Notre Dame like 4 out of 5 years. They beat them in 03, 04, and 07. So since 2000, those are the only 3 wins that they've had. It's not so much about it being a contested rivalry. I think it's more about it's just a traditional rival. It's a team that you've played a lot. It's a local in-state school. And one thing about Purdue that I think that, because like they've played Purdue, if I'm doing the math correctly, it'd be it's been over 80 times. Don't play Purdue. Purdue sucks. You guys, sometimes people kill me. They say like, you look at a schedule like, well, that's a crazy schedule in 2029. Okay, but isn't that what you're asking for when you say stop playing Purdue, stop playing MAC teams? Like, okay, so who are they supposed to schedule, guys? They can't play bad Power 5 teams. They can't play MAC teams. So who exactly do you want them to schedule? What do you want their schedule to look like? Okay, you open the season with a home game against Ohio State, then you travel to Alabama, and then you host Georgia, then you got to travel to LSU, and then you've got the Spartans come to town, and then you got to go to USC. Like, it's good sometimes to have a traditional rival on your schedule besides just Navy that you do win most of the time. And it is a game where, in this era where travel's so expensive, it's nice to be able to hop on a bus and go down to West Lafayette for a game and not have to fly. So sure. I do think there's merit to that game. Is there enough merit to say you're going to play it every year? I think that's more of the question.
And that's my point of, you don't want to get locked into just that one opponent, because outside of the tradition, I agree, you don't want your schedule to be, you get Georgia, then Texas, then Alabama, then Ohio State, and then LSU, and then I get that, but also find the in-between of Purdue and Alabama. And so you still get the tradition of playing Purdue, call it maybe every other 2 years or every other 4 years, or however you want it, because I do believe in tradition. That's what makes Notre Dame great. But I can also look at it and say playing Purdue as a program does virtually nothing for Notre Dame, big picture. Nobody's going to look at them at the end of the year and say, hey, the Irish beat Purdue. That's not going to matter.
Here's why I think that the notion that they don't do anything for Notre Dame is misguided. Because if they aren't good, it's good to have weeks like that. When you've got Texas A&M coming up the next week, or you've got Alabama coming up the next week, or you've got Texas coming up the next week, it's nice to have a game before where you can beat a team 66-7. Yeah. And it's not a MAC team, because beating Purdue 66-7 is going to carry a little bit more weight, not a ton, than beating Central Michigan 66-7. But you're still getting that easy win. And that's where I say is I think sometimes we look past, no, that actually is a good thing, because that means their starting running back only had 15 snaps and he's going to be more rested when you go play this team. So like in that regard, I do think it does something for you. It doesn't help your resume from the standpoint of that's making or breaking where you're seated, but it can help you be better prepared for that next week when you are playing that team that's going to impact your seeding, that you're not having gauntlet after gauntlet after gauntlet after gauntlet. And that's why I think playing Purdue more frequently helps Notre Dame. I will say this, if you can only play 2 Big Ten teams per year, I don't want Purdue taking up that slot, one of those slots every single year. I've advocated for this, Trevor, and tell me what you think. I think I'd have two slots that are sort of rotating slots. In the first slot, I'm rotating Purdue and Michigan State every 2 years. Home and home, home and home, home and home, home and home with Purdue and Michigan State. Because those are the two Big Ten rivals that matter the most to me. They've played both of them way more than they've played Michigan. The Michigan State especially is a school that was very pro Notre Dame joining the Big Ten both times that Notre Dame tried to join. And that's why they always kind of hold a little bit of a special place in my heart. When everybody else was saying, no, you can't be in it, you can't be in it, you can't be in it, we can't have a Catholic school, this reason, that reason, Michigan State was one of the schools that advocated for Notre Dame being in the Big Ten. That's a rival that matters more to me. It's sort of similar. It's not to the same degree, but it's kind of like why you still play Navy every year. If I was going to add any Big Ten team, and you say you have to add one Big Ten team not named USC to your schedule every year, I'd pick Michigan State over anybody else for those reasons. And there are going to be more years where Michigan State is good, where beating them gives you a big win than Purdue, to your point. There are years where maybe a couple other teams are down, like 2017. Well, part of what made that schedule so impressive and that resume so impressive was you did go on the road and beat a 10-win, top 15 ranked Michigan State team that's end of the year ranking convincingly. And there's been years where, boy, that was a great win. Like, I mean, you think about was it 2013 when Michigan State goes 13-1 and their only loss was to Notre Dame, and so, I mean, Michigan State made the college football playoff in 2015. Purdue's not going to sniff the college football playoffs. Even under Drew Brees, they weren't like that. They made the Rose Bowl one year, but I believe the year they made the Rose Bowl, I think they had 3 losses. I'm going to go back and look at that, but I'm pretty sure that they were not like a game away from playing for the national championship. They lost to Notre Dame that year. This is 2000. That wasn't even a great Notre Dame team. That's the team that finished 9-3 and got blown out by Oregon State. They lost at Penn State and then lost to Michigan State. They did beat Ohio State. They beat Michigan that year. They beat Northwest. That's one of the greatest years Purdue's ever had since the 60s and 70s when they were a powerhouse. And then they go lose to Washington in the Rose Bowl. They finished 8-4. It's like, but they're not a team that like, boy, they were a field goal here away from being in the college football playoff. Michigan State has had teams like that over the years. Now, will they get back to that under Jonathan Smith? I don't know. But there's been more periods in history the last 50 years that Michigan State's been that kind of team, including 2021, very recently, where I think Michigan's only loss in the regular season in 2021, I believe, was to Michigan State, correct? So that's where I'd say if you had to pick one, I'd go with Michigan State or Purdue. I think the more likely scenario for me would be, like you said, a rotation where it's 2, 2, 2, 2, home and away, home and away, home and away. And that one slot gets taken up by one of those two teams. Then you have sort of a rotation there. That would be my thoughts on that. First of all, what are your thoughts on that? And then my second question for you is, Trevor, I think that I would like to have 3 Big Ten slots on my resume, so to speak, for Notre Dame if they lose USC. If USC doesn't want to play them every year, that's fine. I'm still going to the Big Ten to fill that spot. Now, I think you could add one of those teams to a longer-term contract like you did Clemson. You could then say, okay, hey, Michigan State or Purdue, let's sign you up to a long-term deal. So that way we got one slot taken care of. We don't have to worry about it. Now you've got 2 spots now that we're going to look to fill with Big Ten teams. Because trust me, there's a lot of Big Ten teams that would love to play Notre Dame on a regular basis. And at least, like, when I say regular basis, I don't mean like every year, but like, hey, let's get a home and home every 5, 6, 7 years. There's a lot of teams like that because it's good for their programs. And so that's something I would say is if I'd be okay with 3 overall, but if you lose USC, that's my first thought is let's try to get that slot replaced by traditional Big Ten teams and then maybe mix in a Washington, who Notre Dame does have some history with, into that equation as well. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things that would benefit Notre Dame is if they're able to, if USC gets off of the schedule, let's say, I want them to pick a team that they sign for 12 years. And I think a good school for that would be Michigan State, because I think that gives you some sort of foundation. Because you could get into a situation where it gets a little bit too messy, where it's like, okay, we got these 2 schools for these 2 years and these 2 schools for these 2 years. And then sometimes the schedules are overlap and then one is home and away. And then we're going to schedule 4 completely, different games. So I think if you pick a school, I love the Michigan State pick. One, I think there is a lot of benefit on both sides. It's a recognized rivalry. You play for a trophy, play for the megaphone. I think that they've played enough good games over the years, impactful, meaningful games, to your point, that it's okay. Okay, there's something to this. Why were we excited about them signing a 12-year long deal with Clemson? Well, the 18 playoff, the 15 game in a hurricane, essentially, the remnants of a hurricane that almost went to overtime, the 2020 upset in South Bend, then a rematch in the ACC championship. And so there was meaningful games behind it, which is my point. So if you get that with Michigan State, one, that helps give them a gauge as well to where they're at relative to consistent playoff competition, assuming Notre Dame does what we think they're going to do over the next 5 to 10 years. Yep. And so that's a good gauge for Michigan, because what we're going to get into later in the show is not every Big Ten team is going to play Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan every single year. And so I think that would give them a good gauge. And I think that would be beneficial for Notre Dame, again, to renew that rivalry, keep the tradition alive. Let's just call it
go. Sorry.
Let's just call it a 12-year contract. You keep Michigan State on it every year. That's your one constant. And then every 2 years, you rotate who your home and home is. For 2 years, you got Purdue. And then for 2 years, you get Michigan. And they're already on the schedule for 2033 and 2034. And then one of them, you do something with, I guess, Wisconsin if you wanted to, or a Penn State if you wanted to. So it gives you the freedom to also play other teams throughout the conference and not just sticking in the, okay, you got Purdue, Michigan State bubble, but then outside of that, in 10 years, we play Michigan. But I think that would be beneficial. So have your baseline be Michigan State and then rotate who your opponents are, a rolling opponent every 2 years.
I like that. Would you like to go to 3 only if if USC bounces, or would you like to see them play 3 even if they keep USC? Because you'd have basically every year you're guaranteed now basically 10 games, because you have your 4 ACC games every year. You're going to have Clemson every year. You're going to have Navy every year. And now you're adding 3 Big Ten games. I'm not the greatest at math, but that's 4 plus USC plus Navy, 4 in the Big Ten. That would be 3 in the Big Ten, that's 9, right? And then the years where you have a 5th ACC game, you're now to 10. So your minimum 9 games every year. Did I do the math correctly on that? So
yeah.
Minimum 4 ACC teams. You'd have minimum 3. If USC is off the schedule, that gives you 9 games. If USC stays on the schedule, it gives you 10, because you have 4 ACCs. You have Clemson. You'd have Navy. You had 3 Big Tens. That's 9. And then if you still have USC, that gives you 10. That gives you a little less flexibility for scheduling national games, which is a little bit of my hesitation to have a 3rd Big Ten game if you do keep USC. But what are your thoughts? Do you feel the same way, or would you like to see more of a Big Ten heavy schedule on your docket, even if USC is still part of it? What are your thoughts?
Because of what we talked about yesterday with the SEC and the perception that it brings to Notre Dame, I would rather that 3rd spot be like an SEC type of opponent, or in your case that you talked about, the year that they have like Alabama and Texas and opponents like that, leave it up to if you do want to schedule a Central Michigan, or if you do want to schedule a Bowling Green. I don't know if I want that to be held down by Wisconsin. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable with that being held down by Nebraska or a Penn State. And so I would say if USC is off of the schedule, I'm comfortable with them having the 2 Big Ten slots. If USC is still on the schedule, I would say add another one and just keep it rolling, which, like we talked about earlier in the show, that's the majority of their years outside of 2029 where they have none, and 2032 where they have none, talking Big Ten opponents.
Yeah.
So
yeah. That's the interesting gauge, Trev, when you look at how to handle the Big Ten, because unlike the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, you didn't have the ACC on there regularly. You have teams that are now in the ACC on there regularly, but then you didn't. In 2000, Notre Dame started their season with Texas A&M, who was a Southwest Conference team. Actually, they were still Southwest Conference at the time. I don't think they went to the they were in the Big 12. Southwest Conference was dead. They were a Big 12 team. You played Nebraska as a Big 12 team. Then you played Purdue, Big 10, Michigan State, Big 10, Stanford, Pac-12, Navy was independent, West Virginia was in the Big East, Air Force at the time was, I believe, a Mountain West team still. Boston College was in the ACC, Rutgers was in the Big East, and then USC in the Pac-12. So, I mean, you kind of had a flavor of all the leagues. My question is do you want to keep the Big Ten slate smaller so you can mix in some Big 12s and some more SECs, or do you say, hey, let's go heavy ACC Big Ten? I think that's an intriguing aspect to this for Notre Dame. And I'm working with the assumption that Notre Dame keeps USC on the schedule for now. If USC's off the schedule, I think that changes things a lot. I'm much more comfortable going to a third Big Ten rotation. And if USC wants to be on it every now and then, I'd tell them to go pound sand. Like, I'd say we get nothing out of playing you twice every decade. If you want to be on this, then you're going to be on this. If not, then we're going to play teams that we don't have to fly thousands of miles to go play just for a couple games. We don't do that with anybody else. Why would we do that with you? So that would be. I'm getting to the point where I'm getting a little bit bitter about how USC is handling this one, and I'm almost to the point where I'm just like, screw them, let them walk away from this and become less relevant than they already are. So my personal take is I don't know that there's a lot of value of playing Big 12 teams with any regularity. I've said before I would like to occasionally schedule a Big 12 team. I'd say like 4 every 10 to 12 years, simply for recruiting purposes. TCU, you come and play us in South Bend, we'll play you down in Arlington in Jury World. You know, hey, Baylor, you come here for a home game, and then we'll go down and play you in Jury World, or we'll play you in Phoenix, or we'll play you, you know what I mean? Something like that, where it's really more of a recruiting thing than it is, hey, we're playing the Big 12. How do we stack up against the Big? No, it's kind of like, no, it's the same reason we go play NC State. We want to get in front of all these Texas recruits. Like there's an element to your schedule that has to include that people don't put enough emphasis on. That's a big reason why Notre Dame kept that USC rivalry for so long, is and why they liked playing either Stanford or USC at the end of the year, because back then you'd hit the road right away. The players would fly home with support staff, and the coaches would immediately go on the road and hit the West Coast. You know, and it's a little different now, but like there was recruiting reasons why, on top of good football reasons, there's also recruiting value to that. That's really the only value that the Big 12 brings. I think every 10, 15 years having a home and home with Arizona or Arizona State is important now, as the state of Arizona becomes more impactful and has more talent. So that's the only reason I think the Big 12 is there. I'm not going to have a designated Big 12 slot every year. I do think there should be at least one designated SEC spot every year. But Big 12, I'm not sure I feel quite the same way.
Yeah,
what are
we
your
see
thoughts
that
on the Big 12?
No, we see that the same. It's just you start talking about your return on investment, getting out and playing Big 12 teams. And if the only benefit is just recruiting prowess out west or southwest or down south, even depending on the team that you're playing, Notre Dame is already starting to show that they have that. And I don't know how big of an impact they're going to have on recruits. Like, hey, did you see what we just did to TCU? It's like,
it's not about that, Trev. It's about them getting to see you, them getting to come watch you play. Like, sure. I've talked to recruits over the years that, like, yeah, first time I got to see Notre Dame play live is when, you know, I didn't have any interest in NC State, but they were begging me to come to a game. I wanted to see Notre Dame play.
Sure.
Like, that matters. And you can't assume that in 10 years you're going to have the same impact in Texas that you're having today. That's why it's about scheduling in a way that guarantees the fact that we're still getting in front of these kids and watch their, you know, where the local game on ABC, or where the game that they're going to, hey, I'm going to finally go visit Baylor. I'm not looking at Baylor. Like, I remember Troy Pride Jr. visited Clemson just to watch Notre Dame play. But he couldn't have done that if they're not playing those games. And so, like, just having talked to recruits, it does matter. Because they're like, hey, you know, my family gets to watch me play at least once a year. All my friends get to come watch me play at least once a year. Because if I go to Notre Dame, I'm going to get it back and come and play in front of my family and my friends. Not, I can't wait to go play Baylor or TCU. It's, sure, I get to go back home to play. And so it's not the specific team. It's more so, hey, we play everywhere, including your home state. And you don't have to always play Texas or Texas A&M to do that. That's kind of my thing. Is like, because if you're going to play in front of you, we want to play in Texas more often. Well, yeah, you've already got enough gauntlet games. You've already got Texas on your schedule a couple of times. It doesn't always have to be them or the Aggies, because then we get back to the whole thing is there's value to sometimes playing teams that you're likely going to beat. You can't have a schedule of 12 teams that are on your level. You're just not going to survive that type of season. And that's where I think the Big 12 could bring some value on top of getting in front of kids in Arizona, getting in front of kids in Texas. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
I don't view playing TCU alone as valuable, but I do think playing in front of kids with some level of frequency does matter.
I would rather that be worked into the ACC schedule and then they just play SMU and have a rotating thing with them to get down to Texas. My moral of the story for me is like, I just don't see the benefit of playing the Big 12 outside of recruiting. And I don't want to like say, oh, recruiting's not a big deal, but I think there's other ways to do that than designating a spot on your schedule, because then again, there's a finite amount of games that Notre Dame can play. You can't keep all of your traditional rivalries and have this deal with the ACC and play Clemson and have 3 Big 10 slots. And they should probably get down to play the SEC. And they also shouldn't have 12 all P4 ranked regular season games. So there's going to have to be some mix of what you do. And the Big 12 for me is just the first one to go.
Just so we're clear, I did not say I want to play them every year. I said I don't see value in playing them like having a Big 12 slot. What I think is 4 games in a decade, I think is good. Get a home and a neutral site against TCU, and then in 4 years after that, you get a home, or 3, a couple years after that, you get a home and a neutral site against Arizona. We're going to play them where the Cardinals play. We're going to play Arizona where the Cardinals play. Like we're not going to Tempe. Oh, you're going to play us in front of where the Cardinals play, because then that kind of shows, like, man, they're Notre Dame's big time. Like you don't even get to play them on your home stadium. Like it has an effect on recruits. And more often than not, those are going to be games where it's a quality opponent, but it's not like you're playing LaDainian Tomlinson's TCU. You do run the risk of some of those years where they're like that. But like there's teams like Kansas State's not on my radar for that type of game. I don't see any value in playing K-State, Iowa State, Kansas, Utah, Colorado. Because what value do you get by beating Colorado unless Deion's the coach? And even then, I don't know that does anything for you. Because it's like, is some kid from Texas going to care that you went out to Colorado and whooped Colorado? I don't think so. They're not going to care about you whooping TCU. They're just going to care about the fact that I get to go home and play in front of my home state. You hear kids talk about, one thing I love about the ACC schedule is I get to go back home and play in front of my, I'm going to play at least one game a year in either Virginia or North Carolina, almost every year. And I think that factors into it. And so but it's not an every year thing. Because to your point, you can't have it like where are your winnable games? Where's your MAC? You got to have a MAC team or a team like that. You can't play 11 Power Fives in Navy every year, in my opinion. Like you just can. And you get to the point where, okay, you got a Big 10 slot, you got 3 Big 10 slots, you've got 4 to 5 ACC slots, you've got the Navy slot, you've got your SEC slot, you've got your Big 12 slot, and now you've got 12 games. And it's like, now Notre Dame fans are like, what? The same people that are like, stop playing Purdue are going to be like, why'd you schedule this, this hard of a schedule? But I do think there's value to occasionally doing it.
Sure.
And I don't know that the other option is you could say, hey, look, every couple of years we want to try to play a Shamrock Series game in either Phoenix or, one in San Antonio, one in Houston, one in Dallas. But I don't know if that's quite the same as playing a team from there. You know what I mean? Like, I'd be curious how that would be viewed by recruits, because that's the other alternative is, hey, we're going to play, we're going to talk to the ACC about redoing the schedule. Hey, get us more SMU on the schedule, and talk to SMU about, hey, let's play this game in Arlington.
Yeah.
And something like that. But I don't know that SMU is going to carry the same weight as Texas and Texas A&M, but that's not the whole point. Neither does TCU or Baylor. It's about getting down there. So that's kind of,
I mean,
Texas Tech's not one of those teams because they're so far out of the way of everything. It's like it's TCU, Baylor, Houston, Arizona State. That's what it is for me.
One thing that they could do, too, is like to your point about the Shamrock Series, just every other year, the Shamrock Series is just against a Big 12 team, either in the Cardinal Stadium or in the Cowboy Stadium. And it's just a rolling Big 12 team every other year.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind seeing the Shamrock Series be a rotating game against the Power Five, the Power Fours. That's an interesting thought, Trev. Like in year one, it's the Big 10. In year two, it's the Big 12. And maybe it's just a team. And then you rotate where you play it. You know, one year you played in Kansas City, next year you played in Arlington, the next year you played in New Orleans or something like that. That wouldn't be a terrible idea. And Irish English said, what about playing in Arrowhead Stadium? I'm a fan of that. I've said that before. I'd love to play a game in Kansas City because you're not in St. Louis, but you're close enough to where you're kind of in that region. You're playing in the home of the Chiefs and all that other kind of stuff. I wouldn't mind, you know, I wish St. Louis still had a pro football team. That'd be a place to go. The Rams were still there, you know, or the Cardinals. Because when I was a kid, Trev, they were the Phoenix Cardinals. Then they moved to St. Louis. And they were the St. Louis Cardinals in football and baseball, which was weird. But yeah, very weird. But anyway, at the end of the day, Trev, the Big Ten needs to be more prominent on the schedule, in my opinion. I think we both agree on that. Here's the final question. This is the hot topic debate that we normally have, that people have. If you're going to talk about playing rivals, should you look to add Michigan on a regular basis?
Define regular. I mean, I
like it used to be, like you've talked about, growing up every year, home and away against Michigan. Like you're either home or you're away against Michigan. Because like you said, when you grew up following Notre Dame up until 2015, they played almost every year. I think there was a couple years where they missed, but it wasn't many. I'm actually going to look that up, Trev, because you were born in 97, right?
Yep.
And so Notre Dame and Michigan, 97, 98, 99, they didn't play in 2000 and 2001, but then they played in 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07, 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, up until they ended the series in 14. So like your lifetime until you were in your almost 20, right? In high school, they played all but 2 years. They played they played Michigan. So that's what I like. It's
I get you.
It's basically it's every year.
I would, in the spirit of it being a limited amount of opponents that you can just fit on your schedule every year, especially if USC decides to play Notre Dame every year, I think 4-year blocks would be a healthy. Like you play them for 4 years, like, you know, home away, and then you have 4 years where you don't play them, and then it comes back again. Something to always look forward to. But one of the biggest downsides for me is when after they lost to Michigan in 2019, I was sitting with one of my buddies who's a Michigan fan, and I was like, well, see you in 2033. See you in 14 years, you know, unless they meet in the postseason. And so that's disappointing, because that was a rivalry that I got to grow up with.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I was like, I remember all the great games. The 05 game was awesome. The 06 game was not awesome. The 07 game was definitely not awesome. 08 was great, 135-17. You know, we know what happened in the first game in 2011 under the lights in the Big House. 2012 was a big implication game, and then they beat the brakes out of them in 2014. And so I would want some aspect of that back. But then it just comes down to, okay, you can't then play USC every year and Michigan State every year and Michigan every year and then try to find a way to get in Purdue. And because for how much of a storied program Notre Dame is, there's like 15 programs that there's arguments that should be on the schedule every single year. Fact of the matter is you get 12 regular season games. So I would go in a 4-year block window, like a rotating 4, you know. So you already get them in 2033 and 2034. So what would 4 years behind that be? Also play them in 28 and 29 and whatever. So
here's my question, Trevor. USC, here's my follow-up to that. USC cancels the Notre Dame series. Do you try to replace them with Michigan permanently for 10 years?
If USC is not on the schedule, I would.
Okay.
That's personal preference. While you still maintain, then maybe Michigan in that scenario that I was talking about earlier, where Michigan State kind of becomes your foundation and then you play other teams in a 2-year rotating window. Maybe Michigan becomes that foundational team if you don't get USC every year. So that would be my own personal preference. But yeah, that's what I would do.
I've said it before, Trev, and this just comes down to your view of the rivalry and view of Michigan. I could not care less about playing Michigan. If they're good enough to be in the playoff and Notre Dame's good enough to be in the playoff, cool, they can play. It's a program I've never had respect for. It's a program whose fan base I despise. It's for football. It's funny is because it's funny coming from me because I was a Michigan basketball fan since 1989 when I watched Glenn Rice and Ramil Robinson and Lloyd Vaught win the national championship up until the last 3 or 4 years, which I just kind of stopped watching college basketball. But I don't see the value in it that a lot of people do. I see the nostalgia of it, but I look at it and I say that's a more recent rivalry because there's been a lot of good games in the last 20, 30 years. But Michigan's not even in the top 5 to 7 as far as like number of games that they've played. And when you look at the way that Michigan treated Notre Dame over the years, I mean, they've played 43, 44, 40. They've only played 45 times. There's teams they've played 70s, 80s, 90s. And the way that they have treated Notre Dame over the years, it's kind of like, I don't really want to like give that team the benefit of earning an opportunity to beat Notre Dame. Now, the counter is like my petty side is like, I'd like to play them enough to get the series lead back. But then I'm like, okay, but that's because they taught Notre Dame how to play. They love to say that, right? Well, as soon as Notre Dame got better than them, they stopped playing them. And then they didn't play from like 1908 to the 40s. And then they stopped playing them again until the 80s. And it's just kind of like, you complain about, nobody complains more about Notre Dame not being in the Big Ten than Michigan fans. And they're the reason that Notre Dame's not in the Big Ten. Like told that they're literally 100% of the reason. If Michigan didn't fight against Notre Dame being in the Big Ten, Notre Dame would have joined the Big Ten on 2 different occasions, including so far back before they were even known as the Big Ten. It was called the Western Conference. And so that's a big reason why I just don't care. But they played from 1887 to 1909, not every year, but and then Notre Dame beat them in 1909. And Michigan stopped playing them until 1942 and 43 because during the war, teams were looking for games. And then after that, they didn't play them again until 1978. And then they became a regular rival until Notre Dame ended the series in 2014. And I just don't have a lot of respect for Notre Dame, for Michigan. And I don't know that it brings a lot of value for Notre Dame. I think it's a lot more, it brings a lot more value for Michigan than it does Notre Dame from a perception standpoint. In my opinion. And the other question is would Michigan want that rivalry with already playing Ohio State every year, already playing Michigan State every year? I'd be curious if Michigan would even want that rivalry. But I like your note. I'd be okay if my settlement was, okay, you play 4 and then you're off 4, you play 4. I wouldn't like advocate for that, but I wouldn't push back against that as hard as I would play them every year. That's kind of my thoughts on Michigan. I'd say if USC leaves, I'd say schedule Michigan State every year. That would be my takeaway. But I also understand why a lot, and it's not just a younger fan thing, Trev. There's a lot of people my age that want to play Michigan every year too, because there was just, they were almost always great games, and far more consistently competitive than Purdue or Michigan State. Certainly,
I think what makes this argument so interesting is I don't think that there's a wrong side. I guess if that makes sense. The point that you're making of, Michigan was the reason that Notre Dame was held out of the Big Ten, and their fans are disrespectful, and the program as a whole has been disrespectful to Notre Dame. I think at that fork in the road, people divide of what they want to do with the Michigan Notre Dame rivalry. Yeah. There's people in the camp of, I just don't want anything to do with them, and I hear that. I get that completely. I am just in the camp of, okay, well, if you're going to be disrespectful, then I want to beat you on the football field. Then I want to play you every year. I don't like you. So if there's somebody that I don't like, I want to beat them even more than somebody who it'll be a good game like a Michigan State. But at the end of the game, you kind of tip your cap of like, hey, I respect you. You respect me. There's just something about good old fashioned hate rivalries that I personally like. But if somebody's just like, hey, this program has disrespected us, and their fans have been disrespectful to me, and I don't think they are a morally sound program, and I don't want anything to do with them. I also understand that too. I truly,
It,
I do. It's just a preference.
and it's partly why they wanted Notre Dame out of the Big Ten, more so than just the fact that they didn't want them in.
Sure.
And funny thing is, I'm not even Catholic. It's just I don't like bullies and I don't like bigots, and that's pretty much what Michigan was forever and still are. Not the bigot part. I'm talking about the bully part. They still are. They cheat. They think they can just bully the NCAA. They're just still that nasty program that just I have no respect for. Like how is what that Michigan program was that acted that way any different than the one now that cheated and then they're going to fight and act like total clowns in order to not, have to admit that they cheated.
Sure.
So that's the other part of it too, is like they're not different than they used to be. They're the same program they've always been. And I dislike it. But there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that don't know that history. When we had Andrew McDonough publish that Big Ten series on Notre Dame and the Big Ten, there were people that are legitimately shocked. Like, I had no idea that this had to do with that Notre Dame had chances to join the Big Ten, but Michigan blocked them. They had no idea. And so it adds an interesting element. So it also is the reason why I would say you want to play Michigan, fine. Don't ever join the Big Ten as a full-time partner. However, it's the final piece, and we'll move on to our Big Ten talk, Trev. I do think that one of the benefits of establishing a more consistent relationship with the league is if the ACC goes away, and I don't think that it will, but if it does, you have a league that you have a relationship with that you could at least have a conversation about, hey, listen, we'll do with you guys what we did with the ACC. You already have our hockey team. That's been a great relationship. We'll bring all the other sports into the Big Ten, and then we'll play you minimum 4 games a year. If you want to go 5 games a year, and we'll replace the ACC with that. I'd be okay with that. I'd probably say 4 games a year. I think with them being a 9-conference game league, I don't know that 5 games a year would be necessarily make as much sense for their league. I'd go 4, and then you could say, okay, we'll go 4, but we want to play Michigan State every year, and then maybe you rotate Purdue and Michigan every 4, Trev, like something like that, and then you've got the 2 roaming, whatever the case may be. That's the one thing I wish the one thing that I wish that Notre Dame would have done with the ACC is I wish they would have done more to get the rivals on at least like one of the rivals on the schedule every year. And then maybe I want to see Pitt more. I want to see Boston College more, teams that Notre Dame has more history with in football and obviously for other sports. That would be the thing. If you do go to the Big Ten, that would be the one thing I would demand. I don't know if the Big Ten would agree to that deal. And if they don't, people say, well, if the Big Ten doesn't take you, where are you going to go? The Big East. The Big East would gladly take Notre Dame's non-football sports. Gladly. And well, who's Notre Dame going to schedule? They're going to still schedule Pitt every year. They're going to schedule Boston College every year. They're going to schedule Syracuse every year. Those ACC teams that the Big East, the Big Ten, and the SEC don't want are going to play Notre Dame every year. So you still have that on your schedule. But that would be something I would like to see them do differently if they if they were to get that opportunity. I don't know that would happen, but it's something that I would consider because you do have other options. People don't realize that the Big East is still a thing, and they would gladly take Notre Dame. So hopefully it doesn't come to that because I don't want to see the ACC go away. But I've watched the Big East Requiem the other day, one of the 30 for 30s, and you start to kind of get like, okay, yeah, the Big East, the ACC is not this great guy, this great league that's just done. So, I mean, they're the reason the Big East went away because they poached all those Big East teams, and so it's like, yeah, it's kind of fair play here now that the Big Ten and the SEC are doing to you what you did to the Big East. So what comes around goes around when it comes to conference realignment a little bit.
I guess so.
Yeah. So, Trev, why don't you wrap up this section, and then we're going to jump into some conversation about the Big Ten next.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of show left, guys. We are getting ready to preview the Big Ten Conference, and then after that, we're going to break down our predictions for how we believe the 2025 season is going to go for them. But you guys know what to do. There's 491 awesome people listening to us live, so be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. But as always, the best way to support what we do here, subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com.